all of the segregated water signs I would see when I would go to church and the bus, you know, we would all have to sit in the back of the bus. The fear in the neighborhood when the police came through, you know, with the guns on the hip, they were all white. You know, just the impact of racism on the African American community was pervasive. It was profound, and it was never ending. You always saw it. And so then I made the connection between law and change. You know, law.
But how do you make that connection?
Well, I had this experience.
I mean, you had this experience in court.
Had this experience in court.
Most children don't have.
No, most children don't have.
Yeah.
And then police. Yeah, people would go down to the police station and you never see them again. That would happen. People go down there, you just never know what happened to them.
Right.
You know, and then the stories that you would hear about. And police was part of law. You know, and I was looking for a way. I said, how can I make this difference? And then Thurgood Marshall. I later had a teacher who had been, Thurgood Marshall brought a lawsuits when he was general counsel at NAACP in the mid-30s on equalization, teacher equalization of salaries. North Carolina and Virginia. That was a black tax. You know, black teachers got one thing because you were black, and white teachers of similar qualifications got much more because they were white. And he first brought those cases in North Carolina, then he brought them in Virginia. One of my teachers had been one of his lead plaintiffs in the Virginia case. In the Virginia case, Elaine B. Hicks. And so she would talk about Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP. And so, you know,
So this was not history lessons. This was firsthand
oh,
experience.
this is her. Oh no, she would just talk about that. She was just, that's right. She wasn't a history teacher.
That's so interesting because when the sit-ins come along, one of the original sit-in students at North Carolina A&T had a high school teacher who was on the 1947 Journey of Reconciliation, you know, the predecessor. And so this information is just transmitted, and the same thing's happening to you. And I'm guess happening all over the country, all over the South anyway.
It was. I'm sure it was. Because people were affected. You know, the litigation was that we couldn't do anything with the executive branch. It didn't pay attention. We couldn't even get an anti-lynching law.
Yeah.
You know, we had no hope, you know, in the Congress, you know, with the Southern senators in the position of authority about. So the only place we could go at that point was the courts, you know, and the courts weren't always responsive, but once in a while, you know, you could get a semblance of justice. And so she would talk about that because they won that case. And that had a profound impact on her, you know, and I happened to get her class.
And so it had a profound impact on you.
It did.
And Thurgood Marshall was a well-known name.
Yes.
I mean, you knew who Thurgood Marshall was, and everybody knew who he was.
Right.
Now, you also talked about your parents being refused hotel rooms.
Yeah, well, yes. That was in my household. There was a certain awareness. You know, my father was a Pullman porter. That was the first black trade union for blacks.
Yeah.
And A. Philip Randolph would come home with him when they come off the railroad.
Really?
Oh,
really?
Yes. They come off the railroad and he'd come up to the kitchen and say, you know, Pullman porters were closed. And the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters.
Yes, yes.
And Daddy, well, I mean, he was very active and vocal, and people gathered around. And because as a little girl, you know, I met, you know, A. Philip Randolph. But my father, being on the railroad, decided that I want my kids to see something of the country, you know. And so Mother said, good idea, and I can get a break. You know, I will not go.
Right.
So she would, when I was around 10 or so, they packed us up, and we took the first trip to Chicago on the train. Daddy could get passes, and the three of us. My brother's 3 years older, sister 3 years younger. And here we are. We get to Chicago, and we can't find a hotel. My father, we go to the Y, and the people look at us and look over the desk at the three of us and say, no room. And you know that's not the case because somebody just before just checked in.
Right.
We're walking from hotel to hotel. These three little kids and my father in his uniform, trying to find, and that did something to me. That did something to me. And so he eventually had to find one of his railway buddies who
ask.
happened to be at her house, and that's where we ended up. You know, and it was just unconscionable. Just unconscionable. And then you would know growing up what would happen with the trips across country, wherever you tried to travel. You know, you couldn't go anywhere without planning that trip. You know, just because of the rigid segregation. And so I just say, this system is wrong. And Elaine, you know, somehow you're going to make some contribution to changing it. I don't know what it is, but you're going to make some contribution to change it.